Daniel Craig was officially cast as Ian Fleming's James Bond on the 14th of October 2005, thus becoming the sixth actor to play 007 in an Eon production. The story of how he got the role could be a film in itself, as has always been the case with the casting of the part. After the commercial success of Die Another Day, it seemed that Pierce Brosnan would continue for his fifth appearance, but as time went by, producers Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson felt it was time for a change of direction. This left millions of fans feeling a bit disgruntled, as the man who had rescued the franchise in the 90s had been unceremoniously dumped. And whatever the misgivings about the last movie, criticism certainly hadn't been aimed at Pierce. The producers had also finally got the rights to Fleming's first novel, Casino Royale, allowing for the first adaptation of an original story since 1987's The Living Daylights. Craig himself was initially reluctant at being typecast and not wanting to play the secret agent as more of a superhero. But the announcement caused a bit of a stir with the press, taking an instant dislike to his more rugged looks and blonde hair. His unveiling from the HMS Belfast on a hovercraft looked like a scene out of any Bond film, but the press were petty enough to criticise him for wearing a life jacket. A prickly conference followed, and it was only when photographs of Daniel emerging from the sea in the now iconic scene in the Bahamas that heads started to turn. This Bond looked different and reflected audience tastes of gritty, realistic action stars who looked like they could beat someone up and meet the demands of the job. Most were left with egg on their faces when the film was finally released in 2006. Casino Royale was the biggest Bond yet, earning over $600 million at the worldwide box office, becoming the most successful of the year in the UK. It was a massive critical smash too, nominated for 9 BAFTAs, including one for Craig himself, the first and only time for any actor as 007. We met up with a team of fans to guide you through Daniel's 15 years as James Bond, the most of any actor, looking at each of his 5 films before deciding on his legacy. He was playing Bond as he saw the part and has made a massive imprint on the franchise, so much so that it's hard to think of who could take over and try and match his achievements. It's now over 3 years since No Time to Die was released, and I think the last time we did a sort of big few episodes on Daniel Craig, it was before that was released, so much has changed, and absolutely nothing has changed in the last 3 years because nothing's happened. So we may get onto that, but we're here tonight to celebrate the 5 films and his tenure as James Bond, the longest tenure, of course, for 15 years. I mean, technically, he still is James Bond unless I hear otherwise, unless we get some news fairly soon. But because of the way the film ended, technically he isn't James Bond. So, yeah, we might have a few theories about that as well. But before we delve into the meat of the episode, I'm joined by my fellow Really 007 agents, John Kell. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Tom. Good to be here.
Yeah, this is interesting, isn't it, John?
I'm looking forward to this. I started this podcast as probably the sole Craig defender, and I think I've probably been outnumbered to the point of submission these days. So, but no, there's lots of great stuff in there. So I'm really looking forward to actually celebrating and appreciating some of the great things that have happened over the last 15 plus years.
Absolutely. And if there are some diehard Craig fans we know who are triggered by any criticism of him, please bear with us tonight. But we do have reinforcements, so don't worry about that. Right, we've got Math and we've got Harry, my brothers. Good to see you tonight.
Hi.
Yeah. Good
So
to
John,
be here.
John, you have done a bit of a work on us as well. We're not, our minds are not, well, I can only speak for myself, but like, I don't think I think in the same way as when we started this podcast. If you're going back to when we started the podcast, I think my views have evolved a little bit since then, and in different directions. So
yeah. It was rather tongue in cheek. I'm not trying to say you bring.
And the other chap from our podcast here tonight is Chris. Now, Chris, I think it was what I think you'd been re-watching Spectre because Chris
Yeah.
has taken many times to try and finish the film. Not for the first time. He's obviously seen it
No,
before.
no, no.
Trying
It
to
was a
re
rewatch. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think after you did that, I thought, let's go on. Let's sort of have a what do you call it? Like a retrospective of the Daniel Craig.
Yeah. So we watched Spectre a few times. Uh, and it's not it's no longer the longest Bond film, but I always kind of struggle to get through it just because it's a bit of a slog for me. But it was a bit of a celebration a couple of weeks ago when I managed to sit through it in one sitting. So it started this sort of reassessment, and I was asked within the group, what my feelings were about the film, which is low on my list for lots of different reasons. But I actually came away feeling actually there was a lot that I did actually like about it, and that's what that kernel of discussion turned into this.
There you go. So we'll hopefully hear some more of those thoughts later.
Mhm.
So the guests tonight, we've got four amazing guests with us. First of all, I'll turn to Nikolai because Nikolai, you were on our No Time to Die debate after it came out, weren't you? Heck.
Yeah, that was and yeah, well, the No Time to Die discussion was an interesting one. I was probably the only person there who like really liked the movie. But I've actually, I've reassessed some things. Um, and I'm excited to talk about Craig's era, I guess.
Good. Very good, Nikolai. Yeah, we're looking forward to that. I think Kevin was on that original episode on when we did a celebration of Daniel Craig. This was for our anniversary, our first year anniversary, and we sort of did it in sections. And Kevin was in for bat for Daniel, so I'm hoping for more of that. Yeah, and Kevin, you've been rewatching them, haven't you?
So
You did.
yeah. When
That's great.
you messaged me, and it was right before James Bond Day, and so I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna. I had time. Like my wife and kids were out of town, so I had the TV to myself.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna watch Casino Royale, and then threw in Quantum right after that, and it's just kind of been it's been a snowball, but it's been one I've enjoyed. So yeah, I figured it was a good time to revisit them.
That's so good, though. Have you ever done that before? Watch all five of them in a row? Or...
I have maybe about a year ago,
Yeah, right.
but not as close together as I have this one, just because I felt like there was a little bit of a time crunch because I wanted them fresh on my mind for today. But I have done it in the past.
Wow. See, listeners taking it very seriously, this show.
I
I've
did my
not
homework.
before. Yeah, in advance. Right, I'll now turn to London Bond, Steve. Great to have you on the show finally.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Now, I'm reliably informed by yourself that you are a big Daniel Craig fan, so that's a good start.
I am. It always feels like something to be ashamed of these days. You've got some
Oh.
really stoic Roger Moore fans. Obviously, people were batting for Dalton all the time, but they all have a place in my heart. Even George Lazenby. But yeah, Daniel Craig has to be my favorite.
Oh, brilliant.
Oh, you see, yeah, refreshing.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll get into more of that later, Steve. But, well, our final guest though is Fletcher. Now Fletcher is part of 007GB, the British James Bond fan club, and your name on Instagram, Essence of Bond. I love that, Fletcher. How did you come up with that name? Remember?
I was just looking for a name. It was during
great.
COVID. And I mean, when you're on Instagram, I didn't even have an Instagram, and I'm seeing, wow, okay, there's a lot of Bond accounts on here. Everybody's got all these dynamic and cool names and stuff. So I had a little bit of a collection. So I just cobbled something together and ended up with Essence of Bond. So nothing profound or too deep or anything like that. So yeah.
Yeah,
That's how I came up with the name.
It's brilliant, and yeah, Fletcher's been part of 007GB for the last 2 years. Is it now? Is that
Yes,
how long it's
yeah,
been?
yeah, 2
And
years, yeah.
certainly Steve has been to nearly all the events as well. We've just been chatting, and there'll be more to come. We haven't managed to get too many Daniel Craig based guests, for those events. I suppose because they're still acting, aren't they? A lot of the others have retired, haven't they, or more readily available. But I'm sure we will at some point. It's just, like I say, it's nothing against Daniel. The reason we haven't done any, it's just more difficult to get them. It's the only reason.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well, you can see with 007 GB, I think the caliber of actor is on the increase all the time. I mean, to meet Maud Adams, absolutely fantastic. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that was incredible. So that was for the Man with the Golden Gun
That's
50th
right, yes.
Brit and Maud. I don't know how many times they've done a gig together for hours where you can chat to them and get their signatures, and yeah, it was remarkable over a whole weekend as well.
Exactly. You know, to make themselves available for a whole weekend, it was absolutely fantastic. Two different events. And like you said, just to be able to actually go up to them and have a conversation, they not only obviously you're interested in them, but they were sort of interested in you as well. They wanted to hear what you had to say. And I think they appreciated your sort of love and appreciation of them as well, which it was nice. It's nice. I've met some celebrities that are very standoffish, shall we say, and are doing it because they are a celebrity, but and it's almost like they've forgotten they're a human being too. But there was a very sort of human, relatable quality with Brit and definitely with Maud as well over the weekend. And just the fact that they, even though they were massively oversubscribed and everyone wanted to talk to them, they did have the time to talk to everyone. And it just left you know a real nice taste in the mouth after the event.
Yeah, it was quality, and yeah, congratulations to Fletcher and Phil and all the team for that. It was class, and I'm looking forward to some more events. We will get on now. We will get on with Daniel Craig. Right. Can we remember where we were or what our thoughts were when he was cast? I know there could be varying. Not okay. First of all, none of us were involved in craignotbond.com. Just that is not. Those are rumors and they're not true.
I can remember. I can remember where I was. I remember it was in the common room, the sixth form common room. So when I was probably 17, that'd be right, or 18. Yeah, and it was announced, and in the common room, I think it was even on the television, him coming down the Thames. And I remember being a little bit like, "Whoa, you know, this is a totally different look, blonde, not a familiar household name." You know, I had to do a bit of digging to find out who he was because at that point. Actually, I'd seen him in Tomb Raider. I will have seen him in Tomb Raider by then. But other than that, knew very little about him. And in my lifetime, it was the first real casting of James Bond that I was conscious of, if you know what I mean. So it was the first time I'd had to think about it. And then I remember like things like the website coming out, craignotbond.com, which I found. I remember us as brothers, not in a mean way, but we found quite funny just because of how abrupt the web address is. Craig not and I just them being backlash and stuff. I'll tell you what, never once occurred to me, and I still don't agree with this criticism that he had to have a life jacket on. That never once
Rubbish.
made me think, oh dear, you know, he's not right. He's got to wear it like. I understood perfectly why he had to wear a life jacket. Still do. But yeah, I remember where I was for that moment, and then the journey towards kind of Casino Royale was like, right, this is all new, and I understood why it was new, having had Die Another Day. But yeah, that was the moment when it was cast. I remember.
Was there anything in Germany, Nikolai? Was it a big news story?
Well, I was 10 at the time, so I don't think I would have noticed if it was a big news story. I definitely remember my mom and my brother talking about it, perhaps after Casino had already come out, talking about how they didn't think that he was right for Bond, and there was a lot of talk about the blonde sort of thing in Germany even, which now in retrospect sounds really stupid. But yeah, I did. So I guess I got the impression that there were some negative connotations for more old school fans, I guess.
I think some of the negativity, which again, I don't know, it won't be a problem this time, I don't think, is the sort of more abrupt ending of the Pierce Brosnan era that a lot of people were attached to. And certainly, you know, people my age, mates of mine were, you know, he was their Bond almost, Pierce was. And so this, you know, story that he'd been kind of binned off. Probably exacerbated in some ways that whole, and then who's this new guy? Oh, he's blonde. Oh, he's wearing a life jacket on the announcement. Unfair criticism. I don't think that was. I just think that was a factor. The fact that Pierce had been kind of replaced in some ways. So yeah, I don't think that helps for some people.
Yeah, I think any change of the actor has brought challenges for the new actor. I think Pierce is probably the only one that was really heralded, because we've had that gap, haven't we? And we knew that Tim wasn't coming back. Timothy was difficult for him because he was sort of jumped right into it after Roger Moore was so popular, and then the others had to follow Sean Connery. So it's all very difficult. But I don't think anyone had that kind of criticism that Daniel did, and you've got to sort of respect him for just getting on with it for that first few months. Because what we did get, I remember one of the first things we saw was it's a bit sexist, the picture of him getting out of the ocean in the Bahamas, and
knives with the floppy hair on the boat, and the suit isn't particularly fitted very well, and then all of a sudden we have got this specimen basically, and maybe it's because I've not really, well, I don't know. I don't think any Bond has probably done that physical transformation to that extent before, would you say?
No, I mean, I know
Roger for
wait, you wanted to talk about it? What was your first film at the cinema then, Nikolai? Your first
Skyfall.
Oh right, oh wow, okay, right, that's interesting. Yeah. Right, we will get onto that later, but right, Kevin, what was it like in America, the news when Daniel was cast? Can you remember?
Yeah, no, I do. And before I move on, just that I implore you to find the Nerdist podcast that Daniel Craig did back in 2015. This was on the Spectre tour. He talks about that day when he was announced, and it is hilarious. It's really funny. He speaks into just what he was thinking, kind of what he went through, and just how he thinks the criticisms kind of, started there. Which a lot of you guys have said. It's really funny. You can find it on YouTube. It's great. It's a great interview overall. But yeah, just it's really funny. But yeah, I mean, it was a big deal here. I remember because I grew up. My first Bond movie was GoldenEye, and yeah, so like Pierce really was my Bond growing up. Tomorrow Never Dies was my first one in the theater. So I kind of watched those were my tapes that were in the VCR a lot, those 3 90s ones. And then Die Another Day comes out. I go to see it. I didn't hate it. I really didn't. I was just kind of like, it's fine. Like I was a teenager by then, and I was just kind of, I wasn't thrilled, but I didn't think it was the worst thing in the world. So I had kind of cooled off a little bit on Bond maybe. And then, yeah, when they announced Daniel Craig was that 2005, I guess?
Yeah, it probably was, wasn't it? Yeah.
So that would have been my freshman year of college. And so I didn't know him at all. So I was just like, yeah, sure, whatever. He looks completely different to Pierce. And I didn't know any of the, the drama of him, of, Pierce wanting another round and, them just deciding to go the other direction. So that was just not on my mind at all. So I went into it with a really fresh face. So I was on board 100%. I was open to it, I'll say. Like I wasn't sold, but I wasn't opposed to it, if that makes sense. But I remember it was a big deal here for sure. I think Bond announcements are always exciting, so you're gonna get the attention that you want for sure.
Well, the announcement was at the Belfry when he went on that mini hovercraft thing, and then had the sort of prickly press conference, a bit like Timothy Dalton did.
Looking at the legacy of Bond, Roger Moore, Sean Connery, now it's sort of sunken in. How do you...
Not yet, no.
No, but how do you feel? I mean, looking at what's gone before, you must kind of feel, do you feel pressurised? Do you feel nervous about it? What?
All those things, but I mean, it's a sort of responsibility, but it's also a huge adventure, so I want to, get as much out of it as I can.
Do you really want to stamp your mark on it, though? Do you want to make your own mark on it?
Oh, yeah. Obviously.
When you knew you got the role, have you practiced any of Bond's lines to yourself in the mirror? Or to anyone that you know?
Honestly?
Yes.
No.
Really?
Fletcher, of course, 007 GB had an event there, didn't they? At the Belfast.
Yes. Yeah, we did. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you remember what your thoughts were, Fletcher?
It's a tough one because obviously here in the Bond is big in the UK, and whenever there's a Bond announcement, it's on every news channel, in the papers. So I can't really pinpoint exactly when I first found out, but I do remember obviously him coming in the speedboat with he had the sunglasses
Yeah.
on, the floppy hair. He looked a bit scrawny. I didn't know who he was, and that wasn't an issue. I didn't know who he was because it was like, okay, cool. I don't need to try and imagine somebody well established, in the role. But obviously, we're used to Bond looking a certain way, and I was like, okay, Eon probably know what they're doing. But I liked his voice. I remember when he was speaking, he was very to the point. He was sort of self-assured a little bit. I could tell that he was a little bit standoffish, obviously, because of I think he knew that some of the questions that he had to sort of, tackle, there was a bit of hesitancy from from the media, but I think he handled it well. But yeah, I remember after that, what do I go and do? Try and find out, okay, have I seen this guy before? Turns out, like someone else said, he was in Tomb Raider. I had no clue he was in Tomb. I didn't realize it was him. He's like, all right, okay, but he's playing an American in that. Okay, and then I discovered Layer Cake, and that was a brilliant film. Obviously, he's playing a very different character, but it's his range that I was sort of looking for, and he delivered on that. And so in my head, I was thinking, okay, maybe we've got something here. He doesn't quite look like, the archetypical image of Bond, but maybe we've got something here. And then we got the what was it? The stills of him in the tux with the gun. His hair was still quite
Still long,
long.
yeah.
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 Long hair.
But it was like, okay, I can work with this. I can work with this. And again, you had your Craig not Bond, blonde, Bond not blonde, all of this crazy stuff. It was, yeah. At the time, I was on two websites, forums. I won't mention them, but as you can imagine, internet forums, they just went crazy, and it kind of sullied the experience of the hype for the film. But yeah, it was. I was really looking forward to it. So yeah,
Roger Moore was pretty blonde as well, wasn't he? I mean, when
Yeah.
yeah, he was. He
even that's
was.
really fair, is it? Chris, you probably the only one of us who have, when you were pretty young, had seen such weird films like Mother, and the the lesser known Daniel Craig. I've seen that
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not one for the kids, is it? But yeah,
No.
you must have
No,
known him.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when he was announced, I was really quite excited about the casting.
Huh?
It was such a sort of a very different direction. And I obviously absolutely loved Pierce Brosnan. Done a brilliant job, and similar to like Kevin said, it's like I saw, Die Another Day. I thought it was fun. I thought it was messy. I thought there was a lot wrong with it, but I was like, it is what it is. And occasionally you get that film in the Bond series where it's a bit rough, and then the next one is a bit more polished, and you feel like there's the quality sort of improves. So I was just thinking, oh well, it'd be great to have another Pierce Brosnan one. But when obviously it was announced, I was really sad to see him go. But it sort of made sense. It had a fairly decent run. That some of the reviews on Die Another Day weren't obviously particularly good, even though it made a huge amount of money. And just basically, just kind of culture things had changed. So I completely understood why they wanted to change. So when he was announced, I was like, "Oh right, yes." I'd seen him in a few kind of art house films. Like I say, I'd seen him in The Mother, and Enduring Love. I think had been released, and then there's Love Is the Devil, which was really early on in his career. But I think I think it was after he was announced, but before Casino Royale, I went to see Munich, Spielberg's Munich, and I thought when I was watching that, I thought, man, he is a movie star. I thought he had a huge amount of charisma in that film and almost kind of stole the show. He had a sort of like low key Steve McQueen kind of vibe of kind of his presence was always felt whether he was in the center of the screen or not. Anyway, I thought he was great in that, so I was really excited. Never had a problem with him being blonde. I thought his introduction down the Thames was great. Again, safety. I wouldn't want to go on there without all that safety. And he just looked, yeah, I thought he kind of looked the part. Like I say, he wasn't quite polished yet. They just put him in a suit. But I thought, actually, yeah, again, like Fletcher said, I know, film's not out yet, but I can see this kind of working. And it'd be really interesting. And then obviously the fact that the pieces were sort of falling together, obviously them getting Casino Royale, Martin Campbell, and so all those elements started to get really quite excited about what the potential was for this new kind of direction for the Bond series, because obviously we'd always gone in one direction in terms of chronologically, we just carried on, and now we're kind of going back to a sort of an origin. I know that's been discussed prior in the series, but they never actually committed to it. So I was really excited. I thought, there's a lot of other actors at the same time who were sort of shortlisted. Again, like Hugh Jackman was on, had been mentioned, and I thought, yeah, I can see that. But there's sort of, fairly safe kind of choices. So I was quite encouraged by that kind of bold statement of casting someone who had this art house background, where you could sort of see him go off. And like I say, his career was very much going in a different direction, just as I think that he was announced. So I was really excited when he was cast, actually.
Could you see why they cast him? And was he the Bond that you thought he would be based on, your prior knowledge?
No. I think I thought
No one know.
I thought it would be, given it was Casino Royale. So when I was, when it was announced, I thought this is going to be much more, more of a thriller than an action film. I thought that was sort of the way it was going to be, more like kind of Connery, more like From Russia with Love, having action elements, which he sort of tried to do, obviously with Casino Royale with some success, but I thought it was going to be much more the sort of espionage thriller style, because he wasn't, like I say, he was in Tomb Raider, but he was hardly, had a background in action. So I thought, yeah, more thriller than sort of big action. So when it came out, I really enjoyed Casino Royale, but that was one of the issues that I had. It never quite fit the source material with the action side, the set pieces that they were created around that. And I always found that sort of slight disjoint between the two was my main criticism. But I think he was great.
Steve, who was your sort of favourite Bond growing up until Daniel was cast?
I think like probably most of us in the UK, I grew up with of this age, Roger Moore, 3 o'clock on ITV on a Saturday afternoon, and you'd watch it with your parents and whatnot. So Roger Moore was my Bond growing up. Um, I then sort of discovered that there was a whole different side of Bond when License to Kill was on at like 9 o'clock, and I was old enough to watch it. It was when you sort of started half the film and then you had the news in the middle. You had to wait and watch the news, and then it started again after the news. And then I thought, wow, this is slightly less comedic, more edgy, more slick back hair, more gritty type of Bond that I was really into. And then obviously roll on GoldenEye, and I was suddenly like, oh my God, this is amazing. But so I was a fan of the franchise with Roger Moore, but I really fell in love with the with Bond, with GoldenEye, and obviously Tomorrow Never Dies was a strong follow-up. The World Is Not Enough was also quite great. But then Die Another Day, I remember seeing it in the cinema, and I came out of the cinema. I was like, well, that's it. Then I'm no longer a Bond fan.
Oh
It
no!
sounds really, really harsh, but I was thinking, where could they possibly go from here? You've got this invisible car and kite surfing and all of this sort of this thing. I was like, right, that's it for me. Like the next film's going to be absolutely ridiculous. I'm paying no attention to it. So because it was all over the press, I was acutely aware of the James Blonde and the boats coming down the Thames and the suit that he wore and whatnot. But it didn't really phase me because that was it for me. Bond was over. And it went as far as I didn't watch any of the trailers. I didn't go to see Casino Royale in cinema.
Whoa.
For such a big Daniel Craig fan and a renewed Bond fan, should I say, I can't hide it. It's the truth. I didn't go and see Casino Royale in the cinema. I saw it. I think I was at university, and everyone had gone out, and there was just this DVD of Casino Royale. So I stuck it in, and I watched it, and I was like, "Oh, okay." Really, really dropped the ball on this one. This is absolutely fantastic. It's like somebody had gone into my head and thought, right, what would Steve like as Bond?
Right.
And we're just gonna go and create it. And maybe I should have paid attention to the trailers. Maybe I should have paid attention to the hype because I feel really bad that I missed a lot of the hype. But I was straight back on it after that. So that is my confession. I did not see it in the cinema, but and I thoroughly regret it to this day. I do go and see it in the cinema every time it's on. So
Okay.
that's sort of my penance for missing it. But so I did miss a lot of the hype when they announced Daniel Craig as Bond, which was a shame. Obviously everyone was giving him criticism. Like Fletcher said, he was batting off some of the comments and dealing with the press quite well. But that's probably because he read the script and he knew what was coming. It's like having an ace up your sleeve. He knew it was going to be a slam dunk.
Yeah. It did need to change, didn't it? I mean, we're Die Another Day apologists to an extent. But I
Yeah.
remember leaving the cinema thinking, a bit like you, like, is that it now? Is it just going to get more and more ridiculous? Because
Well, what's next? The car's invisible. In the next film, is it going to fly? What is he going to drive? Chitty bang bang? We don't know. But how much more ridiculous? I appreciate they're always trying to give the audience something new and something to come back to, and stick with the formula, but not to be too formulaic. To be a bit of an oxymoron of itself. But I just thought, yeah, this is just going to get more and more fantastic and less credible, and that's not really for me. If you go back to Thunderball, Goldfinger, Doctor No, this Aston Martin DB5 from Goldfinger, for example, it's incredible, it's unbelievable, yet somehow you could believe that it could happen. Whereas, you make a Vanquish vanish and it's just that step too far. And I thought if they're going to keep going in that direction, then I'm really not interested. I fully admit I hold my hands up. I was wrong. I should have paid attention to the trailers and I should have seen that they were going in a totally different direction.
Well, they went totally different direction. They had a Mondeo, didn't they?
Well, even so.
So realistic, yeah. So
Yeah.
no. Oh, there was a defibrillator, wasn't there?
It does work. Part of me thinks with the fashion, somebody at Eon or in the production company has thought through what Daniel Craig's going to wear, and they're sort of determining what a man of that stature should wear. So I'm thinking, if I would like to emulate somebody like that and be like that, go back to the old adage that every man wants to be Bond and every woman wants to be with Bond. That's how I should dress. So therefore, I should buy those products, and I should drive this car, and I should go to these locations.
You got lots of tight suits, Steve.
Yes, but not tight because they're tailored. Probably tight through one too many pizzas. But, oh dear!
I love the names. It was Buy Another Day. The product placement.
Oh yeah.
No time to buy. Did anyone say buy fall? I've just made that one up.
That's a good one. Write that one down. But you are right. It's. You think about that scene in Skyfall with the Heineken bottle. It does get a bit much, but
paid for it.
Yeah.
Paid for the series, so got to be grateful.
Exactly.
Keep watching for part 2, where we go into Daniel's first James Bond film, Casino Royale.